All right. Today, this will wrap up the current series I'm doing on my journey through your course, Critical Thinking in the 21st Century. So today we've got Dr. Richard Carrier. Um, what I want to start off with, I want to get the bad news up front first, and then we'll talk about all the positive things. Well, no, first thing is I want to respond to a criticism that was levied against me by a viewer. If this wasn't a private message, it was another YouTuber, but he said that the part one came across like a infomercial, and he's right. I should have made a disclaimer up front saying, this is not a promotional. I'm not getting paid to do this. I just laid it out there very matter of factly, but it sounded like an advertisement. So that was not my point. That was not my intention.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't read it that way, but I can see why other people would.
Right. But to counter that, we're going to lead off with some negative criticism, just to prove to everybody that I'm not getting paid for this, and it wasn't a perfect course. The first thing is the challenge questions. This was the core of your course, and it's 3 challenge questions per week. There's 12 challenge questions total in the entire month. 12 questions. How would you respond if someone said that's not enough interaction? That's not enough. How would you feel about it? What if you periodically sprinkled in some 10-question progress checks or some quizzes?
Yeah, I get the opposite complaint. I get the opposite complaint from students. Is usually it's too much work, so I had to dial back. Really, that's something you can dial. So one of the things that I try to remind people that are taking any of my courses is that this is your opportunity. You've got a month with an expert to ask all the questions you have, bring up all the examples you wanted to discuss, all the, I would want students to be more asking me questions about how would you do this, or what about this, and so on. And whatever it is, particular critical thinking problems they faced, they want to have some advice on, or even the text. So I try to elicit some reactions to the text, asking questions about which problem, where did you have the biggest trouble with the text, for example. And I say you can give one example, but you could give many more examples, right? So I want students to be more engaging. They often don't. I think a lot of students just don't have the time, so they engage minimally. They do the readings, they do the challenge questions. They might ask me a few questions. There might be some exchanges, but you've paid for the course, so you could actually literally ask way more questions than that than I think students think they can or have done. And I think that's the way to so if you want it to be more involved, you could even specifically ask for that. It's well, I would could you give me a 10-question progress quiz? And I go, all right, I'll see what I can do. So I can do that, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to overwhelm students by showing them too much work. That's where most of the complaints have been, is that I've been asking for too much. The readings, I have to dial back if I can. And so that's the reason for that. But it can be dialed up. Students get full reign to ask all the questions they want about the course text, the course readings, and anything that I want to convey, or about anything that they want to discuss, specific examples in their life.
So you have been fine-tuning the course over the progress of its initiation based on suggestions. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's gone through 3 iterations, right? So I first did this for CFI. CFI was trying an online learning annex, and that tanked. And then we broke away from them to do our own separate thing, which is secular. It was PSA, Partners for Secular Activism. But that platform just wasn't working for me, so I went solo, and now I just do everything through Google Groups. That's the easiest, lowest admin difficulty. Well, the fewer things go wrong, I should say, tech-wise. I am not reliant on a tech to get the course to work that way. And during all of that, I've had a lot of feedback from students and have adjusted courses and so on.
Someone accused you of being a Luddite, one of our fans, but you know what? If Google Groups, it is kind of, I guess some may think of it as antiquated, but I mean, if it works, if it serves your purposes, hey, why not use it?
It's Moodle doesn't do anything significantly different, right? So Moodle is the new fancy online education platform, and it's a nightmare. Like it doesn't work well. It's not easy to replicate things on there. It's confusing. Students have a hard time with it, and it doesn't. In the end product, it doesn't do anything differently than you can do with Google Groups. So, I think people think Google Groups, and no, actually, Google Groups is the way to go. It reminds me of like people who want the biggest, fanciest car with all the electronic everything, and then one little thing breaks and the whole thing freaking is hosed. Whereas if you have like an old 1960s Volkswagen, that thing will fucking run forever and it doesn't matter, right? It's easy to fix anything that goes wrong with it. So it's like there's an advantage to low tech is they're not overcomplicating things. It's easier to fix, easier to deal with. So I would like more stripped down things. I think we're going in the direction of making things more complicated and more with more features only makes it buggier and more subject to difficulties with students, especially since like I have students from all around the world and of all ages. So I have to teach Luddites as well as as B1. So
Right.
so it is advantageous to use a simple platform that accomplishes what we need. We just need an online forum, readings, replicable, and that's pretty much it. And you can serve, the internet does everything now, so you can serve videos easily. Like you don't need a special software for this anymore.
You mentioned the people do the readings and they can ask you anything they want. The two things. What if it's someone like me that doesn't even know the right question to ask you? I've got your ear, but I don't even know,
Mm-hmm.
what path I'm supposed to go down. And two, it's maybe it's a military thing. Like in the military, they burn. If they need you to know information, they burn it. Being in the
Yeah,
Navy,
yeah,
they burn it in
right,
your
right.
brain.
You
So
look
they
at
don't just
any
gloss
manual for
over.
any rank, right?
Yes. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know, call for fire or treat a sucking chest wound, right? They don't, we actually shoot a pig, a live pig, and we treat the sucking, it, deflates its lungs.
yeah.
We have to
Mm-hmm.
do what's it called? Pneumothorax. We have to do
Thoracic, yeah,
the thing under the rib. We have to treat a sucking chest when we're doing it live, and it's over and over and over again. The Marine Corps
yeah,
martial
yeah.
arts program, they burn it into you're doing, I don't can't tell you how many, you might think counter, bent armbar from the side mount, but until you do it 2,000 times and you can just turn
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So in this
Well, that's
course,
that's
I don't
that's the
know.
difference between like a 1 month course with only one person teaching it, and weeks long where you have multiple instructors making, you know, 30 to 40K a year, and you've got students who are being paid to do it, right, rather than paying. It's not like you paid $1,200 to go to boot camp. You
That's
got
true.
paid twelve hundred
Yeah, for
dollars
the cost of this course, I guess that's what
So
we
yeah, that's
should
right. It's only
expect.
$49.
Right.
So that's it's a 1 month. It's not meant to like be like college level, take up a lot of your time. It's just get you exposed to ideas. And then to answer your question before, that's part of the challenge questions are meant to get you thinking about things. So like that example of what did you have the most difficulty with in the course text? And it says like, give one example, but you can give more if you want. That's one example of something that's spurring your thoughts. But also, like as you're reading text, you might have like, I don't understand. I've had students, for example, say like, I don't understand this particular thing here. Like, what are you trying to say here? Or they'll come in and say, well, I've heard the opposite. I've heard this thing here. And then we get to discussing contrasting views and opinions and stuff. And so all the course readings are meant to evoke like, well, what am I not getting out of this? Is becomes clear as there's things that you don't understand. Whereas if it's reading and you totally get it all, oh yeah, I knew all that already, then there's less to ask about it, right? But if it's a reading that exposes you to something new that you've not encountered before, you might say, well, how else could I apply this besides the examples in the book, for example? So there's a lot of ways that you can evoke your own thinking about that stuff. And the challenge questions are meant to kind of also get you thinking in that direction.
I don't know. It's a retention thing. I'm just thinking, this is purely constructive criticism, but
Yeah, yeah.
it
And the
seems
best
like
way to do
there's
it, you're thinking, would be to give actual research assignments, right? Like give a real world, well, here's a thing that I want you to critically think, right? And of course, then to do multiples of those, right? So more, not just one. But that, like, students are like, oh, it's too much work, is the problem I get. But if students want that, they can always ask for it. Like, throw a task at me, and then I can throw that in. And so it doesn't. I don't want to like overwhelm students by asking too much, but I'm completely open to them asking for more than is set out in the course roster.
can we I don't, is it possible to maybe go back and look to see if there's a better way to aid in retention is what I was lacking in this course. Like
Hmm.
right now, if you held a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you the difference between modus ponens and modus tollens. And I
Even
know
I
I
get
got it.
those
I took 54
confused.
pages of
Yeah, yeah.
notes, but
Even
so
I get
I
those
just,
confused,
yeah.
and yeah, that's a good example because even I get those confused, and I have to always Wikipedia them to like remind myself. All right, right,
Okay,
to get those the
that
other way
makes me
around.
feel better. And
Right, and
syllogism,
that's
like I had a
yeah.
really firm
It's
concept of syllogism, and now I can't even tell you. I know it has to do with something in the first premise. I see. I forgot already.
well, I mean, you mean anthememe? Anthememe? That's different from syllogism.
What?
So I
See,
throw
I don't even know
anthememes at
what is.
people.
Totally forgot
Okay, yeah,
already.
it doesn't matter. I mean, the name doesn't really matter. You don't really need to know what it's called, just to be exposed to it. But that's part of the point of like try to like save all the readings, save all the resources. Like the resource page that has all those links to the websites that go into this stuff. Those are useful. Those just by themselves are useful to have. Let's grab those and save them, and then you can always go back. I'm using the fallacy files, fallacy taxonomy all the time. So it's like, well, do we have a name for this? Has that already been named? Is there a fallacy for that? Where does it fit in the thing? And so there's a lot of actually really good websites on fallacies that you can use for that. So that's why, I try to like have those curated resource lists for students so they can keep going back and applying the skill in the future.
the the reading assignments, like I said in part one, it takes up at least 90% of the total like time on this course.
Yeah.
Another constructive criticism, instead of read this entire article, like just give us excerpts of like the most pertinent, because that, Richard, and come on, that's a lot. That was for people on the go. I mean, I
See
devoted
what I
my
mean?
entire month
Yeah.
to it, but some
This
people
is
cannot
this is
devote.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And mind you, of course, since you're not being graded on this, so you actually could just skim the readings if you want, right? Like so you don't have to read them all through. But the reason I can't do that, I mean, sometimes I have done, like when I have a curated lecture to read, that actually is the result of my culling all the useful information out of like a dozen different books and articles and trying to put it down, distill it into one place in a more organized fashion. But you can't, like up to a point, you just, this information has to be conveyed. There's no way to avoid it. And so that's the biggest challenge, I think, in the course is completing the readings. But then you keep the readings after that. So you can keep going back to them as reference works. That's one of the values of this is that you've got a curated list of this is the best collection of stuff to keep going back as a reference to develop these skills further as you apply them in your real life after that.
The main reading assignment is a book that we have to buy. So the course is 49 and the book is
Correct.
another 20.
Yeah,
A
I
lot
try to
of
keep
people,
the course text purchase price to about that or less. Yeah, or at least in that vicinity. It depends on the course,
right.
but
So another point maybe I wanted to get across and see, just bounce it off you, but a lot of people will enroll in this on the fly, like on the 30th or the 31st of the month, and want to start their course the next day.
yeah,
Well, they
right.
really can't, because a lot of people, I'm fine with Kindle, but a lot of people want that book in their hands. So
Sure. Yeah.
maybe in your course, like description online on richardcarrier.info, maybe
Mhm.
say, apply for this, give yourself enough time to order Leviton's
Yeah,
book and have it sent to you.
that actually is in there, but I could make it like adding the mention of time would be a useful addition. I
Okay.
mean, it does say like the course requires this text for every
Yeah.
course. Like they each have a
Give
required
yourself
reading.
enough time to have the book shipped to you if you like the actual book.
Yeah, and that was especially a problem over the last year because of COVID slowed down supply lines, so like getting books was harder. A lot of my students use the electronic versions though, so I've had less issue with that. But I should mention that in there anyway to like remind people that if you're going to go on print, if you're going to rely on print, you need to give
Right.
yourself some lead time.
For casual reading, I'll always go digital. It's just easier
And
for me. But this,
especially now
if it's a course textbook, I'm going to be writing in the margins. I'm going to be highlighting, and you saw mine. It's got tabs all over it.
And it's worth pointing out that now I'm teaching every course every month. So if someone's going to have a delay, they can say, well, let's bump this to another month, right? Until I get the book. So you can like move the month around. It doesn't have to be one particular month. So even when I advertise a specific course, it's just to call attention to it. You could actually take that course in any future month. So there is time that people could use. But I should mention that as a resource, time resource that people should use, so they remember to do that, I guess, if they're going to rely on print.
You offer 10 courses, say 10 people enroll for that month in every course. You get 100 people that are hitting you with 3 questions a week. I mean, that would be unhuman.
Yeah,
So
I don't
do
get.
you
I
have a
don't
plan
actually.
for, do you have a plan for like a maximum threshold? Like, okay, this is, I can't take any more people this month.
Yeah, I haven't needed that yet because I don't get that many students. I mean, I used to get like 10 to 20 per course per month. Now that I'm doing every course every month, because each course I would used to only teach once a year, right? So now it's every month. So the students actually get spread out over the year. So I get courses now that have like 1, 2, 3 students. So I might be teaching 10 courses with that many students each. So there's smaller classes. I mean, the total comes out to about the same, but that's just the way I organize it now, because so many people, that was the one thing that people wanted the most, was they couldn't take the one course they wanted in the 1 month it was offered. So they could be offered another month. I said, well, now I can just offer them all the time. And I can do that because I'm running it through, that's one of the advantages of Google Groups, is I can just quickly create a new course for anything at any time. So it was more arduous to duplicate courses in the Moodle platform, for example. But this, yeah, so you can take any course anytime. So I haven't had a problem where I've had like an overwhelming number of students. However, if I did, then that would mean the revenue would actually allow me to like replace other work I'm doing during the month doing the teaching, right? So I would just adjust my schedule for the month to accommodate that. And I haven't run up to a problem where I've had to say, oh, we got to close this course or bump people to another month, which is probably what I would do. I'd just say, hey, could you take this in another month, like next month, to split people out, spread them out a bit. That's probably what I would do if I ran into that problem, but I haven't run into that problem yet.
I took the course, the critical thinking course, for the month of May. I think there was one other student, or maybe I was alone. I don't even know. If multiple students do enroll in a specific course, I don't know if Google Groups is the best platform for intergroup, a little peer exchange, like when you're not available, or just some quick questions to bounce off each other.
Yeah, no, that actually has happened. That's Google Groups, because Google Groups is an old-fashioned forum, right? It's just like it's like Reddit or any other old-fashioned forum. You can post and exchange conversations all the time in the classroom, and then everybody can watch and listen in. And when I had the large classes, when I would have like 10, 20 people in a class, you would often have a lot of students discussing with each other a lot of things in the threads, and then all the other students could watch those discussions, and then I would weigh in here and there. Those are the best classes, right? But you need a lot of students in, and they need to be talkative. A lot of students aren't very forthcoming or talkative. They're shy, even though it's online. It's not even in person. They're still shy about participating. But I can't make people participate. But if they do, it does create that effect that you're talking about, where you have a lot more interaction. You get full threads of discussion, and because it's a paid course, it's well moderated. Like, no one's going to be trolling or acting like a jerk in there. You generally have like good, productive, respectful discussions, which is unusual on the internet. So I do like it when that happens, but it does require like more students.
Right. Switching gears to a specific point in the course that I found really troublesome, and it could have been made easier if there was, I don't know, at some point in the course when you said, here's all the philosophical abbreviations to develop a philosophical argument. It almost looks, not almost, it is a math equation, it looks like equations. And so I didn't know what lowercase m, that we had trouble with the tilde. I couldn't even find it on my keyboard, and hypothesis, implications, and how to build an argument using all these freaky acronyms. If there was a glossary where we could burn that in our memory first, and then we could start talking about it.
Yeah, good idea. I mean, of course, the solution for that was exactly what you did, is you asked questions, and then I answered them. And so that's actually one of the best ways that I teach in these courses. The students will ask a question, because I often can't anticipate what someone doesn't know already. And so when they ask questions like that, then I get to like explain them. And sometimes if there's other students in the course, they benefit from that exchange as well. And so that's the best way to get the most out of my courses, is to interact with me, asking me questions, and giving me the opportunity to explain things and provide info. And that's what I know how to do well, is explain things. So like, even if something's a little over technical, I can figure out a way to make it less technical when discussing with someone. So that's I think that's the funnest part of teaching these courses is when I
Yeah,
get that
I'm
interaction.
sure you're hit with a lot of curveballs. Okay, the last negative criticism, we'll move on to the good stuff. Um, I would like to have seen an option where maybe once or twice throughout the month that we could like a phone or friend option where I just don't get this. I don't want to wait for your response. Um, let's set up a time in the next 24 hours to just go live for 10, 15 minutes and just where your camera's down on a piece of paper and you're walking through the math with me, or you're filling in the boxes in a chart with me, and I'm talking specifically about that. What's that one I really got hung up with about? I tried to construct a vegetarian version, a Bayesian argument. Remember
Yeah,
that one? Yeah,
yeah,
and
right,
I was
right.
way off on my
Yeah,
numbers.
right. We went through that in the forums, discussing it, pro and back and forth on that. I see what you mean. That see though that would cost more for me. It's much more difficult for me to find specific times to do things like that and take the time out. Especially if I'm been working all day and I'm exhausted by the end of the day before I have any free time. So for something like that, if I were to offer that, it would have to be like a bonus, like a $5 or $10, maybe $20. I don't know. I have to look at the math and figure it out. But it would have to be like you'd have to pay a premium, kind of like YouTubers do with the what is it when you have people pay to get their question asked? It's
Oh,
the
super chats, but
super
now
chats and things
they
like that.
have
Yeah,
super stickers which are like up to 50 bucks, $100. You can put a
really, I didn't
sticker
know
and
that.
emojis on there, yeah. And then there's memberships. No
Right.
one's actually it's like Patreon, but it's for YouTube. There's a little
Yeah.
blue join button, and they can become a $1 a month to $20 a month member on
Okay,
YouTube.
that's like Patreon. I like that feature.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, it sucks though because YouTube takes a 30% cut. Patreon doesn't take near that.
30%. Okay, that
Yes,
is a bit.
super chats are at 30. When you give $10 to your favorite, during a live stream just to get your
Hmm.
chat up there, yeah, YouTube just took $3 of that.
They get 7. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's how
Um,
YouTube makes tons of money then.
yeah.
One
Okay.
of the ways.
Is the critical thinking course your most popular course? I'm doubting it is, but I think it should be.
No, it should be. Yes, I think there's a lot of skills in that people don't know, right? That they need. I mean, people think, well, I'm a rational person, therefore I know how to critically think. And so, no, actually, there's a lot of knowledge you need to do this well. And in particular in the course, there's the 3 features. Traditional logic is an issue, and I think a lot of atheists know a lot of that, but they often don't know. There's aspects of it they don't know. But then there's the cognitive biases thing, which I think is one of the most important. That's why I call it critical thinking for the 21st century, is what we've learned about how our brains don't work, and what we have to do to software patch them, right, to get around those things. And then probabilistic reasoning, the importance of that, importance of getting that right. There's a lot of fallacies and mistakes that happen in there. But yes, I think people need these skills and would benefit hugely from them. I mean, no matter where they are, at what level they're at, or what they're doing, professionally and personally, useful in your profession and useful in your personal life. But no, critical thinking gets a lot of students, but the most popular are counter apologetics, um, and weirdly free will. I do science and philosophy of free will, and that gets a lot of attention, and which is fun because I really love that course because it uses this one concept to touch on every aspect of philosophy. So if you want to learn philosophy, it's a good test example where you get to touch on every aspect of philosophy through this one difficult concept that people debate a lot. And then historicity of Jesus. That's one that gets a lot of my course on the historicity of Jesus gets a lot of students.
That's a great segue because my next question was I suspect that there might be it might be a non-zero number of people that would take your historicity of Jesus course to challenge you, like as an opportunity to challenge you personally. Like they have a certain mindset and they're not going to bend from
I
it. They
wish,
don't want to
yeah,
learn from you,
right.
and they just do it to challenge you.
Yeah, I wish. And I think it would be cool if that happened because I think it would be a great teaching opportunity because I would treat it not like a debate in an open forum, I would treat it like a classroom discussion. Like, oh, very good. Let's discuss why you think that. Here's some contrary points. What do you think about those? There's a particular way that you teach when you teach courses. I mean, I was trained as a teacher in college. So there's a particular way that you can do that that's actually productive and a valuable way of teaching. And it's kind of what I do with Sam Harris. I use in my free will course, I use Sam Harris's book, Free Will, even though I completely disagree with him. But it's the best course text because it is the best representation of the position that he takes. And it's approachable to most people. And so having them interrogate the text is actually a really valuable teaching tool. And so like having someone come in and try to be a spoiler would be great if they're like sincere. And I think one of the big problems is that people who are actually against the suggestion that Jesus didn't exist, their reasons are more emotional and dogmatic than actually professional. And consequently, they're not willing to pay $49 to have a serious discussion about it, even though $49 is trivial, right? If you look at like Bart Ehrman, who makes probably six figures a year, to pay
he asked for a $2,000 honorarium just to be on my show. Well, just to be on my show for 30 minutes, $2,000 honorarium.
Okay, no, he's $5,000 for a speaking engagement, and I think someone offered him $10,000 to debate me, and he turned it down. So clearly,
interesting.
People were willing to pay him to do this. So clearly, he doesn't value a serious discussion on this enough. And that's what I find. So there's usually you don't get serious opponents in the courses because they're not really invested that much in having a serious discussion about it. Not enough to pay for it. Basically, it's even a trivial amount.
On your free will series, your free will course. Do you feel like maybe, okay, are you kind of extending past your field of expertise? Because you said you read Sam Harris's book, and a lot, I think to really fully understand free will, I have my opinion, and which is totally subject to change because I just don't know much about it. But don't you think a course like that would be better taught by someone with a neuroscience background? I think the core of free will is physical, neurochemical
I
biology.
disagree because neuroscientists are often shitty philosophers, and free will is a philosophy subject. And there are some exceptions, but usually some of the worst philosophy comes from scientists because they don't take philosophy seriously. Sam Harris is an example. He's actually ridiculed philosophy. He holds it in contempt. Rather than taking it seriously and actually learning how to do it properly. This is one of the biggest, most common criticisms of Sam Harris. Like almost all his mistakes are the result of him not taking philosophy seriously. And that there's a truth to his objections. I think there's a lot of philosophy is garbage, right? But the fact that a lot of philosophy is garbage does not mean all philosophy is garbage and you can ignore it and you don't have to learn anything, right? There's this particular skill set that you need to develop. For myself, my PhD is in intellectual history. Philosophy is one of my PhD majors. History of philosophy. And then I've published multiple articles in peer-reviewed philosophy journals on the subject of philosophy. So I have more cred in this area than Sam Harris does. And consequently, I take this seriously. I read the peer-reviewed literature. I study the different arguments. And I also look at the science and neuroscience. A lot of it's relevant, and that comes up in the course. And so does law, right? You have to study. There's a lot of legal precedents and a lot of Supreme Court decisions that discuss free will that are very informative about how mainstream reality treats free will as a concept. So all of this stuff you have to take seriously and do. I do want to, at some point, get a peer-reviewed article published on the subject of free will, specifically to dissuade people from trying to make that kind of argument. It's like, well, you're not published in this. Technically, I am, but under peer review, I haven't done specifically free will yet, but I could. And so if I find time, I just don't get paid for that. So since this is my profession as a writer, spending time to write an article just to boast that you got it under peer review, but you got no money out of it, is hard to justify. It's easier to make revenue producing things that people want me to produce rather than something like that. But I do want to do that. I will eventually. But yeah, I'm a published philosopher, like in a legit sense. So it's not completely out of left field. And then what I expect from students in that course, I mean, generally what I'm doing is like, here's all the stuff that I've found. read it, think about it, and then I challenge them to debate it and discuss it. Like, what position do you take and why? And then I'll present. Well, here's a counterpoint of view. What do you think about that? And then we proceed from there. So it becomes a productive teaching engagement. And the end result, of course, is you learn tons of things about semantics and neuroscience and philosophy of science and lots of other things, and even just like theory of person. Like, what does it mean to be a person? And it's why it's one of my favorite courses, because it touches on so many aspects of philosophy that are actually themselves more important than the free will debate, which I don't actually think is all that important ultimately.
That would also apply to an abortion debate too. Theory of person.
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
right. And although what will happen is you'll get into the debate as well. It doesn't matter if it's a person or not. It only matters if it's a human. And you know, right? So you get into this debate of like, why do we care about a genome? I don't, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of abortion debates become like silly and ridiculous, and it becomes clear that people who are against abortion, they have some ulterior motive to be against it. They don't actually have a principled philosophical reason to be against it, and so everything is for them is rationalization, and so it's a whack-a-mole game.
It's an emotional knee-jerk
Right.
reaction. Yes, that's what I try to avoid. And I think, you know, just enrolling in this course is a statement. It's saying, you know what, everyone thinks they're good at critical thinking. Enrolling in this course is an initial statement saying, I think there's more to learn. I think I can do better. Yeah. I'm going to switch gears real quick to just personally my journey through the course. I really feel like that I put too much emphasis on overwhelming expert consensus, right? And I'll give you an example. Just today, well, it started a couple days ago, but I'm still involved in it. It's a Facebook debate. Me and Jonathan Sheffield's dad. I don't know if you know Jonathan.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I do.
So,
Jonathan Sheffield and I know each other well. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've worked together
We're
several
tight.
times.
We're good friends. He's a great guy.
For
Christian.
people who don't know, he's an Anglican Christian apologist, but he's one of the cool ones. So,
So we were talking. I forgot what we were talking about. Anyway, I'm constantly it's spouting overwhelming. Oh, we're talking about which came first, Mark and priority, right? So,
yeah. Okay, that was
so
the subject.
he's Matthean priority, and he holds to this based on what ancient. He uses he even cites 1900 years of ancient wisdom, and I'm saying, well, we stand on the shoulders of giants because we know all that 1900 years of ancient wisdom, plus we know this, and we know handwriting analysis, we know modern archaeology, and I dare say it's foolish to think that Mark did not come first by at least 5 or 10 years. Right. And he put, I don't know. And so throughout this course, I was really emphasizing overwhelming expert consensus. Is there an alternative to that? Is it worth using that as my main hill to die on?
So there's two aspects to that question. One is the time resource issue. Is like, is it even important to argue this, right? So that's the first decision you make, right? You can say, you know, the consensus overwhelmingly says such and such. I'm not really invested in this, so I don't really have a reason to argue with that at this point. So you can use overwhelming consensus as a legitimate reason to not examine the issue, as long as you're not going to try and shove it in someone's face. Well, maybe that's wrong, but I don't have any reason to debate that or look into it right now. But if it is something that's important to you, or it's relevant, for whatever reason, the reasons don't matter. But if you really are, actually, I do want to say more than that. Then what you do need to know is, why is it the overwhelming consensus, right? There has to be, because there could be an illegitimate consensus. It could just be a dogma, and then it's just everybody says it because everybody says it, and then that doesn't work anymore. And that's more common probably in the humanities, so in biblical studies and history and philosophy, than in the sciences. But you still find some of these dogmas in the sciences too. There was even just one that came up recently in last year. There was this dogma about how much virus could be transmitted by droplets from the mouth, at what range, and all of this stuff. And a lot of mask theory in the early months of the pandemic were based on this dogma, until someone questioned the dogma and found out it wasn't based on anything. So they went and looked. It was a complete telephone game of confusion based on some study from like 50 years ago. And when people started doing new studies, they were getting different results and learning different things about it. And by the end of the pandemic, we know one of the most important things we learned is ventilation is probably the most important thing in architectural design now, that we weren't taking seriously until now. Now, a good ventilation design in an indoor building could make it highly virus resistant. Like, it would make it much safer to be indoors if you just ventilate properly. And there's a certain specific ways to do that and not do that. But it took a whole year of the pandemic to like do the studies. So there was this dogma that scientists kept repeating. No, that's the dogma. Why are you questioning it? It's a consensus. And it's like, no, it wasn't really a consensus, right? It's just everybody agreed to agree that was the case, and no one really like checked. And so that's rarer. That kind of thing is rarer in science than in humanities, but it happens a lot more in humanities. And so in Jesus studies and in biblical studies. And I think so, you say overwhelming consensus supports Markan priority. I'm sympathetic to Matthean priority. There is actually, I think it's more damning to Christianity to go Matthean priority. If Matthew was the first gospel written, Christianity is screwed. But that's we could do a whole other show on just why that is. Obviously, Sheffield doesn't see it that way. They see it as, the Anglicans see it as, this vindicates the original Christian teaching. Therefore, the original Christian teaching is true, which is a fallacy. But that's what they get. That's where they go with this stuff. But in that, so that's why you want to ask, why is it the overwhelming consensus that Mark was before Matthew, and is that just a dogma people keep repeating, or are there good reasons for it? And that's why I would recommend Goodacre, and that's why Sheffield debated Goodacre. Mark Goodacre is one of the leading expert on this.
Oh, did that debate already happen? See, I'm so out of the loop.
I don't know. It might not have.
I don't even think it happened yet.
Yeah, it might not have.
By the time you're watching this, it did come out. So
probably, yes.
I don't even know which side of the fence Sheffield and Goodacre are on. I'm assuming. I'm assuming Sheffield is on the Matthean.
Yeah, Sheffield's defending Matthean priority because that's the Christian tradition, and he's all about Christian tradition. Goodacre's, this is his prime field, is discussing priority and
this should be good
intertextuality of the Gospels. So Goodacre is going to be the hardest opponent for anyone to debate on this subject. But it would be a good debate to watch for this exact reason, is that you'll see Goodacre will give reasons. There'll be good reasons why we conclude Mark came before Matthew. And I think if you're going to defend a consensus, you have to have the combination of, all the experts say this, and here are the reasons they say this. When you combine those two things together, it's kind of unassailable. And so I think in a good consensus case, that's how the argument works. And it can be really fascinating to learn, just because you learn just the methodology too, right? Of how do historians answer a question like that? And when you go and look at what's the consensus based on, you learn some things. And I found it always fascinating digging into those questions. Is why is the consensus such and such in any field, in any topic?
Whenever there's a debate here locally, I'll go to it, but I still hold true to, 2/3 of a formal debate is useless. It's them reading off a pre-designed piece of paper for 20 minutes each. And then, the counter, the cross exam. Okay, you can get that's slightly productive. The Q&A at the end is really what I watch for. Let me switch gears, Richard. I've already taken up too much of your time. I got two scenarios for you. The first one has to do with miscarriages. I don't know how up to speed you are with it. I'm assuming maybe not much, but I'm just going to read this headline, and you tell me as. Like me, just become me for a minute, or just any of the viewers out there.
All right, sure.
If we scroll past a headline like this, just list in order of importance what we should do to fact check it, like the steps involved. Just wave tops.
Sure.
Okay. This was a Twitter. Someone retweeted this, citing that. 80% of pregnancies end in miscarriage after COVID-19 vaccinations. And I'm going to tell you later that I got a lot of the facts here. The figure is taken out of context. It actually came
isn't it
from
always 80%. I mean, that's just the standard miscarriage rate, isn't it?
That's exactly what I was kind of that's what I was kind of leading you in with.
Anyone who's done the abortion debate knows this, because they say, well, God aborts more babies than anybody else. Well, but a good question. Like, suppose you didn't know that. Like, you and I knew that, and that's a really good example of how people game knowledge to try and trick and manipulate. And yeah, so you'd see a headline like that. So right, so you'd see like, well, first you'd follow it to the article, and then you would vet the article in terms of where am I getting this from? Is this a
But
science
here's
journal
the
or
deal:
whatever?
the Journal of American Medicine, and it's chart after chart based on race and a geographic location, and there's a lot of numbers, and people aren't going to invest the time to crunch those numbers and figure out why it's that.
Yeah. Which is the first rule of critical thinking, is that's what liars are counting on, is people being lazy. So if you're going to choose to be lazy like that, then don't believe any of those headlines, right? It's like, I'm not going to waste my time vetting it. Well, therefore I don't know it's true, right? So I think, but people don't do that. People have motivated reasoning. They will believe things that they want to believe. So if the headline supports something that they believe, they'll, yes, right? And they'll say, well, I've been vindicated, rather than asking, well, actually, is that true? And there's a variety of ways that you would do that. I mean, first of all, you could go to the original article. I'm sure that actually, if you read it carefully, will immediately explode the entire claim. Or you can go and like, well, the first question I would ask and I would ask this even if I didn't know the answer already, which is like, well, what is the miscarriage rate before COVID? Like, so like, 'cause the relevant thing is, has it changed? That's the only relevant question, right? And so that'll be the first thing you go look for, is look for pre-COVID information about that stuff. And that's what I think in critical thinking in general is when people use numbers like that, but the statement does not mention change. How did it change, right? So that's always a red flag. You want to look into that.
Okay, last scenario. This is my own personal construct. To break this down, this is in line with during the course. You asked, one of the challenge questions involved me putting together my own argument, and it was a shit show. And I didn't. Your main criticism was you have to state the premises in the conclusion. All the words have to add up.
Oh yeah,
When
right. That's a common
Oh, it was
common
about
thing.
Islam, and some followers of Islam are violent, but I didn't put that in the conclusion. I
Yeah.
concluded that if you practice Islam as it is taught, you are violent, I think.
Right. But that's very common, though, and that's why it's really important for these courses. Is even just straightforward syllogistic logic, which atheists think they've mastered. And I see this in arguments. Like, I'll see a bad atheist argument against the existence of God, making the same kinds of things, where they present premises and a conclusion, but there are words in the premises that don't end up in the conclusion, and there are words in the conclusion that you can't find in the premises. That's not a valid syllogism, and that's why syllogisms are so useful. I mean, it's probably the only use for them, is to compel you to make sure that you get a completely valid structure, so that you can see what assumptions you were actually relying on before you turned it into a syllogism. Because once you turned it into a syllogism, you might realize you had some hidden premises in there that you weren't thinking about. And that's one of the most valuable things to do, not only about your own reasoning, but to catch other people doing it too, because they'll do this as well. And so learning that one rule is that the words that are in the premises and the conclusion all have to line up, right? They have to be the same if you want a well-structured, valid syllogism.
Okay, so in line with that, here I'm going to explain to you, and you tell me what's faulty about what I'm about to say. I think my premise is people believe in conspiracy theories because they are self-centered, because the world revolves around them.
Okay.
They have
That's the
an
premise.
inflated self-esteem, and that's why they believe in conspiracy theories. Just like that joke I told you, Ray Charles is God, because Ray Charles is blind. Love is blind. God is love. So Ray Charles
Yeah.
is God. Okay, it's like that.
Good equivocation fallacy. Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, this is just a premise. All right, go on.
Yeah. People are self-centered. They think the world revolves around them. So they don't want to not exist anymore. So they fear not existing. Therefore, they fear death. And if they fear death, they need to create something in their minds that prevents them from dying. Like some part of them lives on after death, i.e., an intelligent agent that's omnipotent, that can facilitate that, i.e., a god. So they believe in God. Most conspiracy, find one that isn't an evangelical. All right. So they believe in God,
There
and then
are there there are atheist conspiracy
science
theorists.
throughout the earth, science, whether they mean to or not, I think it's passive, but it does chip away at that idea of God. So science undermines, it's a threat to their little belief. So they want to attack science, undermine science, and the best way to do that is to whatever science says, I'm going to say the opposite. Therefore, we get flat earthers, we get creationists, we get anti-vaxxers, and so there's my argument. The
Yeah.
reason people want to,
In terms of strict
yeah,
syllogisms, that was a jumble. So there wasn't really a strict syllogism in there.
right,
So that would be, but I don't think this, if you could formulate that in a strictly valid syllogism, I don't think that would be a problem. I think the problem runs into the premises, actually, which is a question of soundness versus validity. You can have a completely valid argument, but if one of the premises is false, then the argument is unsound. And so I think in the case you made there, it all hinged on the hypothesis, which is that one premise about the reason people are adopt conspiracy theories is that self-centeredness. That's actually an empirical question, and it's one that's been asked a lot. In fact, I was just recently reading the peer-reviewed literature on this yesterday, preparing for this weekend, which by the time this airs will be a long time ago, which is the E-conference, the GCRR E-conference on the historicity of Jesus.
oh yeah, I saw that.
And then one of the things that I'm going to bring up in there is that, well, I don't know if I'll bring it up in the conference talk, but it might come up in the paper that results from it, is that amateur Jesus mythicists are often conspiracy theorists, and their reasoning is very similar to conspiracy theory thinking. The psychology is very similar, and it's a kind of grandiose delusional disorder. And so I was researching all of this, and so I was looking at what actually empirically have we found about why are people conspiracy theorists. And there's a variety of different competing hypotheses right now. There's evidence pointing one way or another, and it isn't self-centeredness that's really the focus. There's one of the competing theories is loss of control. So people feel like they no longer control anything. The world is way past them, is blown past them, and trying to regain control and make themselves more like they understand the world better and gain control over it is to focus on a conspiracy theory and defend it. And it makes them feel like they're special, which isn't necessarily self-centeredness. And it isn't the self-centeredness that causes it. It's the sense of loss of control. The world has just left them behind. And so though you look at people's psychology and their psychohistories, it often tracks that's one of the reasons. That's been argued against, however. There's some evidence. There's a debate in the scientific field about whether that's it. And others have, it's just an epistemic breakdown, that it has more to do with identity politics, so that we've become so politically divided that what you have people's sources of information you used to have agreement more or less on which media could be relied upon, what things the government said could be trusted, agreement on that science was reliable. If you go back to like the 50s or 60s, for example, but there's been such a systematic effort to undermine reliance on all of these things. You have Fox News, which is it's entirely intelligently engineered to undermine confidence in sources of information. The corporations have been doing this. The oil companies, the tobacco companies have specifically mounted massive campaigns of scientific disinformation to make people distrust science. And we have actual documents that have been uncovered from these corporations where they lay out this is actually their plan. And they were doing this in the early 70s, at least by the early 70s. So there's been all these campaigns and efforts to undermine trust in information. And when you become unmoored from any reliable source of information, well, you can make up anything, right? And so what are you going to do? You're going to choose people that you share similar beliefs and ideas with. And then any kind of weird belief that gets metastasized in that community will become fetishized and will become like basically the new religion, which is the other interesting thing is that conspiracy theories look exactly like religions. So if you go by look at Christianity, what is Christianity but a massive conspiracy theory about how cosmic entities are conspiring to hide the fact that they actually are against evil, even though there's all this evil in the world, right? You look at the argument from evil. What's the response to that? It's a massive, it's a cosmic conspiracy theory. It involves conspiracies among supernatural agents to hide the truth from you. But it's the same thinking, right? It's the same kind of elaborate thinking and the kind of singular explanation for everything. You know, like God did everything. God is the explanation of everything. Just like the conspiracy theory is the explanation of everything. Everything you don't like, the conspiracy theory explains. So conspiracy theories are just like religions. So there's going to be the psychological reasons going to be similar, but they don't seem to serve the interest of immortality, right? They're not conspiracy theories that answer fear of death in the way religion used to. So there's something else going on there. So the competing theory from science is that it's an epistemic failure. There's been people have basically been driven insane by a corporate matrix that was deliberately trying to drive them insane. And so it's that, and then there's the control thesis. And those are the two competing theses right now in science. I don't have a definite opinion on whether it's one or the other or both. There's no reason why they couldn't both be true. So I don't really have that answer. But how we would answer that is we would have to do what these scientists are doing and start going and psychologically studying people and saying, like, what are the correlation factors? What is the difference between a conspiracy theorist and a non-conspiracy theorist? Is it genetic? Is it psychohistory? Is there psychohistory that's different between them? Like, is there correlating features? Like you talk about self-centeredness. Like you could do that. Are narcissists more prone to conspiracy theories than people who fall on the other side of the narcissism?
If they are, that would prove my little...
It would be evidence for it. Yeah,
yes.
Right. That would be the kind of thing you would look for. And so what I would tell people in this is like, well, think like a scientist, like, right? So like you've got a hypothesis. How would you know that hypothesis was wrong? Right? That's the first question you ask. Like, what would you go look for? And once you start looking, think of a bunch of things. The more things you think of, the better. And go look and see. And it's by taking a hypothesis and asking, how would I know it's false? And then doing every realistic, good ass test you could throw at it to prove it's false. Like, try your damnedest to prove it's false. And it's when you fail to prove it false under those conditions that's when you can be confident that your hypothesis is probably true. And you can show the scientific method is doing exactly that. It's designed for that specific purpose. Try to prove you're wrong. Try to prove yourself wrong. And then see what happens.
That's a great segue, Richard, proving yourself wrong, because I want to just give my final thoughts and then plugs, and then I will do the same for you. Great segue. Prove yourself wrong. Yeah. My parents one year for my birthday sent me a Bill O'Reilly book.
Which one?
Oh gosh, I can't. I still have it, but that was my birthday present.
It wasn't Killing Jesus, was it?
No, it was way before that. This was quite a while ago. I was still active duty Marine, but okay. Yeah, they sent it to me overseas. Even I think they sent it to Iraq. And of course, there's a dearth of things to do there on your off time. So of course I read the whole thing. Anyway, I felt pity for them.
My uncle gave me Mere Christianity while I was just before I went on tour.
C.S. Lewis, right?
Yeah, C.S. Lewis. He gave me Mere Christianity right before I went to sea.
So much better than Bill O'Reilly.
I had a lot of fun writing in the margins of that, of how ridiculous that book was.
It was, but as far as like knowledge, I would rather read C.S. Lewis any day than Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I felt pity for them because here they were, 60s, peace, love, all that, hippies back in the 60s. And now just to see them, the mutation that's occurred, I felt pity. And then I realized I should feel empathy, because here they are, like you were saying, glued to Fox News. How much of my real parents are still in there inside? and then I said, no, I've got to feel empathy, because I've got to look inside myself. I'm addicted to Rachel Maddow every night, and how much of MSNBC is doing the same thing to me. And I know, I'm conscious of the fact that it might not be the perfect way to get the news. It's not AP or Reuters. And I'm really watching her because to feel good, to feel that sense of comfort. I want someone to spout everything, all my biases right back at me and confirm them. Right. So I think that's the most important reason. And it's going to sound like a infomercial again. People need to take your course on critical thinking to get outside of that bubble. And it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be times that I was uncomfortable, especially when you were just intellectually bitch slapping me on Islam. And I'm like, I got to get out. It was uncomfortable. And I have to get outside of that.
I was gentle and polite.
Oh,
and
no,
just
it's what
sticking
I
to the
needed to
facts,
hear,
which is
Richard.
important.
It's what
Yeah,
I
and I
needed
think
to hear.
and and I learned that by being on the other side of that, right? So I've gone through a huge evolution. I used like long ago. I was a Marxist. I was a diehard Marxist, and then I was converted to Ayn Rand style objectivism, and I was a hardcore Ayn Rander. Like I had like all her lectures on cassette tape, and then of course I realized that was all bullshit too. But it's by engaging with people and interacting with their arguments, but taking people's criticism seriously. Now that was easier to do in the 90s, for example, than it is now because there's so much.
Flood of
Our
information.
culture has our culture has evolved to the point where people have honed and mastered the ability to be disingenuous and rhetorical rather than sincerely interested in knowledge. And so a lot of arguments, like it's really hard to find a sincere, honest, informed opponent on any issue because almost everyone is a troll or they're completely disingenuous. They want to game the debate rather than they want psychological zingers rather than trying to let's figure out why we believe what we believe and why it's different and try to come to some resolution of this. You don't get that kind of exchange. I used to get that a lot more in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when message boards, when they were first a thing. I got a lot better argumentation and interaction from people, whereas nowadays it's just a shouting match or a poning contest, and no one's actually trying to get anywhere real, and that makes it much more difficult for people because it's hard to find a steel man to go argue with because they're all straw mans of themselves basically. It can be done, mind you, but it's harder. It's hard. You have to sift and look, and so you have to know to do that. That's the other thing. And one of the biggest problems I run into with people on both sides of the political spectrum is they obsess and focus so much on the stupidest versions of their opponents. Like they'll go find some dumbass liberal that said something really stupid, or they'll go find some dumbass conservative that says something really stupid.
Yeah. Every
And
Ken
then
Ham
that's
video.
right. And then they obsess over that and focus on that. And oh, look how they're wrong. And it's like, well, okay, but let's look at Conscience of a Conservative. Let's look at Goldwater's book and take like real conservatism seriously. And you still have Goldwater conservatives, like the Mormon guy ran for president. What's
Mitt
his name?
Romney.
Mitt Romney. He's a Goldwater Republican, and so like he's not a wackadoo,
It's straw
Tucker
manning.
Carlson, for instance. And so it would be nice if people would like steer away from the wackadoos and like focus on like the people who have the strong arguments. The problem is it's harder to find those people now because they're so drowned out by the crazies and the loonies.
Liz Cheney. Mitt Romney.
Yeah, right. There are serious conservatives that you can have decent arguments
I
with. And
would say
not
Rand Paul,
gamers.
but after that exchange with Fauci the other day, holy shit, he is just drank the Kool-Aid too. Jesus,
I think Rand Paul. I think Rand Paul's a fraud, but that's.
I actually kind of respected some of what he said.
Well, see, the thing is, it's
in the
really
past,
hard to find an actual libertarian voting record from him. Every time he's not a real libertarian, and libertarians will say this. No, he's a fraudulent libertarian. He pretends to be a libertarian to get libertarian votes, but he's actually
a lino.
against.
A lino.
He's a lino.
A lino.
But I mean, he's against he's in favor of almost every vice crime, which is a complete repudiation of libertarianism. And he's a Christian, and he doesn't believe in church state separation. It's like everything. There's all this stuff that's like what. How are you a libertarian?
That's a dead giveaway for a libertarian.
Yeah. No, he just plays at being a libertarian.
Yeah.
Unlike his dad, I think his dad was actually a libertarian, like a legit libertarian. He really believed.
Ron. Okay, so my plug. I only got one plug. No, two. I'm going to finish this series, the Richard Carrier, Critical Thinking in the 21st Century. Then I actually have a super fan that is, as we speak, researching parallels between the Book of Jonah and the older Argonautica, the Jason and the Argonauts myth, which precedes it by at least 600 to 800 years, and the similarities are going to make you say, "Ooh, whoever wrote the Book of Jonah was straight plagiarizing." So that's coming up.
I'm fascinated. Yeah.
Yep. And then Faithless Forum, Courtney and I will be down in Austin. I think it's November 18 to 20th, somewhere around there. We'll be down there. We'll have lots of stickers and swag and keychains and whatnot. And then, come by and say hello. You might even get on the show. We've got some little fun things video clips we're going to put together. So that's my clips. Richard Carrier,
Well,
thanks so much for your time. Oh, yes.
yeah, you're welcome. Say more about that. The Faithless Forum, that's going to be a live conference that you can attend?
Yeah, that's
or?
in Austin. It's been postponed twice already.
Yeah, I
For those of
expected.
you that already bought tickets, that keeps rolling over. So your tickets are still good. I'm not endorsing it. I'm in fact,
You're just a vendor.
yeah, no, I'm not even vending. I'm just going to be walking around. Oh, what else? So this course is worth it. The price point is unmatched. And here's the infomercial. I'm glad I took it. Even though there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of perishable skills in there that I need to stay up on. I'm glad I took 54 pages of notes on this. I'm going to keep referring to this. I don't ever see myself as someone who can just instantly create a good, as you just saw, I can't create a good argument. But that was throwing spaghetti against the wall, and maybe I can
Right.
refine that kind of
Yeah,
argument.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a start. It's garbage in, garbage out. You're going to get out of this course exactly what you put into it.
That is true. Yeah.
Richard, your final thoughts on this course, the course in general, and then some plugs.
Yeah, for this course specifically, I teach it every month, and what it really does is this is why it's useful for you is that you need a firmware update, right? Your brain is not well designed. It was not intelligently designed. It has a tendency to mislead, and your culture has not done a good job of educating us either. So, what you want to do this sort of software update that allows you to bypass a lot of these problems and end around them or detect them so you can catch when they're happening. And there's cognitive biases, that's just the way your brain thinks, that can mislead you. There's the command of logic. It's easy to get confused and get that wrong, even though you might be confident that you can do it. I myself have had a long journey of learning how to master logic correctly and get better at it and get sharper at zeroing in on fallacies and things, even in my own thinking as well as in others. And then the probabilistic reasoning, humans did not evolve to be good at this. And so relying on your gut, relying on your intuition, you're relying on this animal brain that you evolved, and it's bad at it. They're bad at this. So that software patch for probabilistic reasoning, there's the math, the basic math of probability is extremely valuable and is something you can apply everywhere to vet your own intuition, to vet your gut, to see is it accurate? Should I trust my gut on this or not? Probabilistic reasoning, having a good command of the basics is super helpful. So cognitive biases, probabilistic reasoning, and logic and fallacies. And I think going into these and rehearsing them and seeing some modern works, like my readings they're all recent stuff, relatively recent things, can be super valuable. And I think it'd be useful, even if you've got half these skills, you could benefit from the other half.
So how someone says, well, let me see a course list, see if there's something that strikes my fancy, and where can they go to get that and enroll?
Yeah, good question. richardcarrier.info. So just one word, richardcarrier.info. You go there, right at the top, there's a menu of options. There's two rows of menu items. One of them is take courses. You can just go right in there and it'll show you links to all 10 courses. You can pick the one and read the course description for any one of them that you want. And then anything else you want to follow up on. My books are there. My social media links are there. Anything you want to know, my blog, of course. So all things Richard Carrier, you can find at richardcarrier.info. But also the courses, it's easy to find. It's right at the top on the menu there.
All right. So those of you that just stumbled onto this last episode, if you want to go back, if you go to the Atheist Edge main YouTube main page and go to playlist, you're going to see a playlist dedicated to. I enrolled in a critical thinking course, and you can start at the top. I'm going to warn you that it's going to seem really dry unless you're really into this, because we get down into the weeds in some of this. But don't fear. You might have to listen to it more than once and digest the material, but it's going to be worth it. And thanks, Richard. And that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for your
Groovy.
time.
Yeah, it's fun being here.